Alright, before we get into the chapter, I realized I gotta start doing it at the beginning of the videos, and I'll just do it real fast. Appreciate everyone for showing up. Obviously, we're going to talk about the new Fairy Tail chapter. We're going to be reviewing it. But before that, I'd really appreciate if anybody who is here, if you could like the video, subscribe if you haven't, comment below about your thoughts about the chapter, and then in general, like, tell me if you know, how much you've been enjoying the series, if you're hyped for this arc, who out of Sabertooth are you most interested in seeing fight in the next couple chapters? And then, like I said, I would appreciate any of those who haven't subscribed to subscribe if you enjoy Fairy Tail content. But other than that, let's get to the actual stuff of the chapter. I have to give my own personal upset. The chapter, like, I didn't have an issue with the chapter in of itself. It was more of I was hoping that Iwashita was gonna be more capable. Like I said, I didn't expect him just to be suddenly like pushing Natsu to his limits, but I was just hoping it would have been like Natsu has to leave base form and like maybe he gets like the idea of going from form to form. It's like halfway between Lightning Flame Dragon and Fire Dragon King mode, to where it's just like Natsu starting, like he's like in that middle ground of using Lightning Flame Dragon mode as a form. That was what I was hoping. Unfortunately, not the case. Like I was saying, like, man, I hope this guy at least like does good against Natsu's base form. It's like, no, this dude gets trash, and unfortunately for me, it was done in like a pure disrespect way. It wasn't even like Natsu just decided to you know, do some attack, and then it's like Blue Note, where he just did an attack where it's like, oh, well, it seems like that did the trick. It just seems like Natsu beats him by accident, and it's just like, man, Iwashita, I know your design didn't stand out, but I liked it, and I liked your pickaxe, but it is what it is. But the chapter, and I feel like if I got the first page of this chapter, I would have been able to probably just probably deduce way more likely. It's like, yeah, this guy's gonna get thumped, just because like Mishima doesn't draw him with a lot of, like, usually when like a character is this big, if he was serious, Mishima would draw him more in like a menacing style, using his size, obviously, probably more shadows around the face, make him look more like a big, powerful, menacing thug, or instead he makes him seem more of just kind of like this big, high energy, like, fighting worker, pretty much. But they're just talking. He's Natsu immediately asks him, you know, why did you know, how do you know about our guild? And the dude's just talking shit. He's like, I bet you I could send you flying to the sneeze, you know, wizards are nothing. And the thing is, in the large scale, yes, in a large scale, most wizards are casters, and they're not going to be, you know, physical fighters like Natsu. Unfortunately, this guy is, he drew a bad straw. He would 100% have drew a bad straw. Not only in the type of wizard that he's against, but also the specific wizard that he's against. Regardless of which, it's just like, this dude, I wish I at least would like to, like, I'd like to know if he's strong for an alchemist. Because it's like, obviously Natsu is dramatically above almost every other wizard, and it really just comes like, because it's like the normal thing, it's like the only way you're really going to get him realistically if you're weaker is if you have some like really, you know, sneaky and tricky hacks, because otherwise you have to be like Suzaku and just put way more effort into it way faster than Natsu, because, you know, Natsu was going in base, where Suzaku immediately was using a serious amount of force trying to put him down. It's just a different set of minds in how they fight, really. But I was a little bummed out because I was reading it, and as like I said, the chapter started, just the way that Mishima was drawing the dude, it was like he either would have been not strong, beaten up quick, or he was going to be someone like Kane Hikaru, where he was silly and strong. And it just seemed like with the weird camera guy, he seemed sillier. So if anybody was going to be the silly one out of this group, it would be him. So it was just like, it just seemed less likely. But he was pretty funny. Like, I like that he's going over like the whole coal miners guild code, and he's like saying, you know, first rule is about safety, the second rule is about, like, you know, keeping a lookout and quality use of your tools. You know, obviously you don't want to use things that might be broken or damaged. You know, you have, say, like, you have a pickaxe that's actually got, like, a bunch of cracks in the metal. You swing it hard enough, it snaps, and then the frickin' metal spike goes and kills somebody or something like that. And then, dig like you mean it. That's just an effort thing. And then the last one is just like, say, get rid of everything in your way. So it's pretty much just say, like, if it's there, don't let it stop you kind of thing. But he's just doing his thing. He's, like, cleaving his pickaxe into the ground, like, golf swinging a bunch of debris. Like, pretty much what you'd expect with the weapon. And I like how Natsu is not really taking it seriously at all. But on top of that, he's confused. He's like, did I do something wrong? Is this my fault? And the dude's just doing his thing. Like, he keeps smashing his freaking pickaxe in the ground, getting heated. And I think he keeps saying he's getting warmed up, and he's got a heat pickaxe. And then, like, while this is happening, Natsu's just kind of, like, having a moment to himself, thinking about, like, Lucy is like, didn't Lucy tell me I should read the atmosphere and figure out if I did something without realizing it? And I thought this was actually really funny. This was one of my favorite parts of the chapter, was just this bit, because it was like a really surprising, mature part for Natsu, which was weird. Because it's not like Natsu doesn't have mature moments, but it was so unexpected, because you would expect it to be more in a serious situation, but it wasn't. And now it's like, the spot that I think we're at, obviously the first person done, this guy is defeated, and I figured that he was going to put up a little bit more of a fight than the other two, but it seems like the other two are, well, three if you count Sai, but it seems like they're just at a better spot. I mean, to be fair, though, they went more in a tricky route, whereas Iwashita went for a direct fight, and he went to a direct fight against probably the worst person in the group to go to a direct fight on. Obviously, Natsu didn't put in a lot of effort, but still, it's like this was the person that it was least likely to work on. And he ends up powering up his pickaxe, getting like a fire buff to it, and then goes to swing it. The tip melts on Natsu's face. And I always thought it was like funny when it's like people downplay like Natsu's capabilities against people with swords. It's like people bring up people like Ichigo and Zoro and stuff, and it's like, yeah, he'll be fine. He'll be fine. Unless you're gonna be like Suzaku, you're just gonna completely just get him before he can do anything. It's not gonna matter. And it's like that only really worked because Natsu went in there in base, and it's like you're not gonna really have that in most normal case scenarios with him. Suzaku, but I think that ended up really kind of pushing Natsu too, because that probably really put him into perspective of like, yeah, you probably shouldn't just kind of like super pace all opponents, because there's definitely guys that are not going to give a shit about pacing, because there are 100% those characters that, they start a fight, they're like, okay, I'm not going to put all my cards on the table, I'm not going to really flex my capabilities yet, I'm going to figure out my opponent, at least to a degree, and kind of like understand what I'm fighting against. And then there are those guys, obviously, that just, they get in there and they freaking go ham. Natsu's like in the middle of that. Obviously, he prefers to get in there and go ham, but he does, especially post Tartaros, he's been way more analytical, way more kind of careful with expenditure of his magic and his powers. But obviously, once he gets to the point where he's like, all right, I'm good, then he ends up just kind of unleashing and going crazy. But after he gets hit in the face, he says that he's going to sneeze. He ends up sneezing, and it just causes like this big-ass explosion in the city. Completely turns Iwashita's pickaxe to ashes, burns him and his whole guild. They're clearly done. Like, they're not going to want to fight back at all. Like, this dude is done. He's going to go home. I'm kind of hoping that he becomes an ally, though. I would like him to become a buddy. I like him. I'm hoping he sticks around at least for a little bit. Maybe helps. We did get a lot of neat, like, general world-building information around this town and alchemy in this chapter, so maybe he'll be, like, a character to help do that. Because, like, maybe it would be, like, after this, once they start getting out there again, like, he runs into Natsu again, and it's one of those parts, because he doesn't seem like a bad guy. He doesn't seem evil. So I could see, like, a part where maybe he goes to apologize to Natsu, and it's, like, one of those things where it's, like, yeah, it had to do with work, but it's kind of pointless. Because it's, like, even if it's, like, hey, this guy's our enemy, if you see him trying to do anything, but it's, like, after you try to do anything and it's clear you can't do shit, it's just, like, what's the point? It's just, like, just hope that they don't beat the fuck out of you, and you're good. But it gets back to the camera guy. The camera dude, it's a little weird because it looks like they're inside the picture, and it's going to be a little weird in how this part goes through, because it's not, I assume it's an alchemy weapon unless it's magic. If it's magic, Urza should just have to get into her Nakagami armor and cut through it, but I think this is more to do with alchemy just because these are alchemists. But definitely a weird little power It seems like it's one that I would imagine it's kind of like card magic, where it would be only really good for like a couple scenarios, because I don't imagine this is like a combat thing. Like you put them in the picture, you rip the picture and they die. I assume if you rip the picture, they pop back out, or if anything really happens to the picture, they are freed. So it's more of like a utility kind of sneak attack kind of thing. But right now we're just having some funny parts, like obviously Jalal and Urza are trapped in here. Urza can use her magic, so the fact that they can use magic, like I said, obviously puts them in a spot where they're going to be able to contend back. How it goes is just going to be the question. It's because it's going to be kind of weird. Like, I assume, just one thing I will assume. I assume that if you put enough power into this little tiny pocket dimension, it would break. Kind of like Genesis Zero, or when Urza was overpowering Masaki's dimension. As long as there is, like, limitations, I feel like they could break out of it. Because, like, these are two of the strongest people on the team. Like, the only person above Jalal is Natsu. So it's just like, Jalal is right there. Obviously, Urza is extremely powerful, but it's just like, it'll be fine. I do really like just the moments of, like, them just having bits together, where it's, like, not them being serious. It's just kind of, like, some fun back and forth. They have some of the best interactions, I would say, in the series. I always enjoy Urza and Jalal interactions. But Sai... yeah, because it's always either fun or like emotional, or you know, it's always got something to it that's valuable and doesn't just feel like it exists. But Sai ends up like going over and pretty much sneak attacking Gray and Wendy and Carla, and he uses another one. And this is, like I said, Sai, and I've obviously said it before, Sai has weird abilities. Like all of Sai's abilities are like so situational. Like he doesn't seem like he can fight, but I feel like, because like Gold Owl is the, because I have to trying to give him credit. It's a little difficult because Gold Owl is the strongest alchemist guild. So even if he's the weak, say like even if he's the weakest member of Gold Owl, that still puts him the weakest member of the strongest guild. It's kind of like when you look at the Grand Magic games and you saw how bad Quattro Cerberus did, but you know Quattro Cerberus is still better than most guilds. Like they're stronger than most guilds out there. Even if they looked bad, it's because it's just the other guilds were better. Whereas like if you put Quattro Cerberus in the Grand Magic games right before like Natsu ends up crashing it, they would have been fine. Like those guys were all trash. But Sai, I feel like Sai like only got in because they saw all these weird situational things he can do, and were like, that might be useful. Because it's just like he's got the love bond, the rival bond, the weakness bond, and material bond, but all of those are so situational. The material bond, I don't know what I'm trying to think of words. I don't know what the like requirements of that are, because I don't imagine it's just like at any point he can just point at somebody and turn them into a crystal. Like I assume there has to be setup, or it's like maybe he can only do this within the vicinity of certain things, or if it's like, think of it, it's like, oh, each person, similar to like attributes, it's like each person, depending on their soul or like stuff about them, maybe their magic, you have to use like a certain type of gem or something to capture them. Like say for Urza you had to have a ruby, no, like a specific ruby or something, like something that obviously has more scarcity to it, something that is a little bit more difficult to obtain but within reach. But it's like, say it's like, oh well, Urza obviously could no diff this guy, but because of this very specific thing he's able to do this to her, or something like that. I don't know. I assume that there's something, because we know that there are set kind of like ways that all his other ones have gone. Love bond obviously goes towards the person you love, so that could be literally anybody. And the thing is, like, that's also true is like Sai was like always, and I talked about this before, but like, because I'll talk about it again, because this is what I mean when I talk about like Sai is so like situational. Because Nineheart is a character that I've mentioned is like, his magic is super situational. Because like, imagine he was up against a powerful character that never had been in a spot where a dead person in their life was going to stop them. Because it's like, you know, that you resurrect somebody in their life that's dead as a Historia, and it's like, oh well, that person is not a problem for them to run over, or that person can't fight, or it's like one of those things where it's just like, it really just depends on the person that he's up against. way more so with Sai, because the weakness bond, as we saw, that can really just determine by perspective. It's similar to like Natsu when he was against Wolfen, and Wolfen like turned into somebody he viewed as strong, he turned into Happy because of Natsu viewing Happy as a strong individual. When he used the weakness bond on Gray, Gray turned into himself because of like how Gray was like viewing himself, obviously. Like, he wants to be stronger, he doesn't see himself strong enough yet for Juvia. And so, like, stuff like that, okay, yeah, like, that's just gonna determine down to the individual. But then it's like the rival bond, I don't really see any times where rival bond would be that useful, because I would assume whose ever character you're fighting, their rival is going to be within the general same scope of power as them in some way, shape, or form. And then the love bond, like, the love bond is just such a, like, it only works in the scenario if whoever they love has, like, no fighting capabilities. Because it's like you turn them into, it's like, you turn them into a woman out of the assumption they can't fight, but what happens when they're powerful and they're like a wizard, or they have curses, or they have alchemy, or literally anything? And like, what happens if you go up against a gay dude and he's like imagine this. Imagine it's literally like Sai goes up against an opponent and he thinks like, oh, I'm gonna turn you into in some random chick and beat you up. But it's like a gay dude who has a crush on like, a celebrity status character, someone like Natsu or Jalal, and then he turns him into them. And it's just like, you could screw yourself over so fast. Because, like, think about that. Like, imagine if you, power level-wise, are a 3, but the person you're in love with is a 10. So it's like, Sai would just boost you dramatically. And it's like, that could work in, like, a support role, kind of. But again, it's so situational. Because if Sai was a support, how many characters is he going to be useful to support where it's like, yeah, it's you're not that strong, but conveniently you are in love with somebody ridiculously more powerful than you that can be useful here. Like, there are people that can work, but I imagine there's only so many times that that's going to work. Like, it's going to fail way more often than not. But yeah, now he's got this material bond. It looks interesting. Like, it switches the bodies of Wendy, Carla, and Gray with 3 crystals. So there's just those 3 are sitting on a table somewhere, and now these 3 are talking gems. And it's just kind of, again, a strange ability, but I want to know what exactly the requirements of it are. Because like I said, I feel like there has to be something that it's like, I want to say equivalent exchange, but it's like in the idea of alchemy, everything we've seen so far has to have some form of rule kind of like switch. Because again, Gray, it's not like rival bond, bam, your rival's here. It's like you turn into them, you're swapping into it, you are altering, you're being altered. So it's like, I feel like there has to be something in there that's like, oh, you can't just use the material bond, because otherwise why didn't you use it against Gray or Gajo? I feel like it just makes sense. It's like, oh, he can't use it all the time, but because they're alchemists too, because that's also important. Like, alchemists, they need certain like tools and materials in order to use their alchemy. It's not the same as magic, but this one's just a weird one that it's like, it seems strange just being there, but I feel like it's one of those ones that once we get to understand its needs and limits, that it'll be like, oh, okay. And he's talking shit. He's like saying it is easier than he thought, but I mean, like, that's because he did a sneak attack, dude. And then back to Lucy and Happy, who's over with like the old lady. The old lady, actually, I would say is the smartest out of the 4, because like Iwashita went for a straight attack. The camera guy did like an unsuspecting attack in like the most probably unsuspecting way, I would say. But that's probably just because people weren't expecting, pocket dimension cameras. And then what's going on with Sai? I mean, Sai's has worked as a sneak attack, but the old lady, I assume she's an alchemist. But it's like, if you're an alchemist and like one of your moves is like you immediately make some like sleeping gas, because I assume you wouldn't be able to really see it, because it's like clear, and then you see like around her it seems to be like a thicker color, but like for one panel, and then it's like seems pretty much clear on the other one. So it just seems like that'd be a really sneaky move. It reminds me of Lotus from Black Clover. It's one of those moves where it's active, but you don't know it because they don't say it. Because he has that one where it's like, I can't remember what it's called, but it's just like he puts the smoke in the air. You don't really know it's there, and it makes you weaker just because you're breathing it in without knowing it. Something like that. I always like techniques like that where it's like characters will just put something, they don't have to say their abilities up. They don't have to tell you that they're using a technique. They could just do it. I know Aizen does that too with Kyoka Soigetsu, but yeah, that's what I mean. It's just when they'll use it passively without having to just tell you, and it's like you get caught because they're just like, why the fuck would I tell you my stuff? But then we get back to the inn they're staying at, and I got some funny Grand Magic Games flashback vibes and like of when they were all late and Urza was mad, but like Natsu's upset and he's saying like, I can't believe everybody got lost, and they're just having like a bit of conversation together. Obviously starting to like be like, okay, well now we need to really look at the situation. It's like maybe they're not lost, something's up. And Minerva, and I think Minerva, it makes sense for Minerva to be the one to really kind of take hold of the conversation, because I think at least from what we've seen, her being the most intelligent, I just think makes the most sense. Like her being the smartest, most analytical character here, because like Natsu has moments where he's analytical and he's able to figure stuff out before other people, but obviously like that's like it's a surprise usually when it happens. It's one of the things like, okay, cool, yeah, I can see how he figured this out, versus like usually it's not going to be like an everyday thing, whereas like Minerva being a very calm and collected character most of the time, who also, as we saw in the Grand Magic Games, was a tactician. Like she looked at everything obviously as more of a king commanding an army. Obviously, like, she wasn't in a spot for that, but it was more of just like how she viewed the battlefield and how she viewed all her assets and stuff. But then they're kind of just talking and doing a thing. They're kind of just like discussing where they're at, and they're just saying, okay, well, this is a mining town, and they're like, okay, Frosh is, there's like Lecter saying there's also lots of jewel shops. Stings bring up lots of pharmacies. And from this, they're able to deduce that because this town has a lot to do with alchemy. This is pretty much like a hub town, like a trade port. And because of that, obviously that means that all these alchemist guilds are going to be connected in a way. And I think that makes a lot of sense because, one, if this is like an important place for alchemists, I would assume that it would make it would make sense that either Gold Owl people are here often, or they have like people sent there, like, well, I guess that would count if people being there, but either just business from there, just because it would make complete sense for them to be in contact with something that is obviously important like that to the structure of alchemy, because it's different than wizards, because the alchemists need to keep getting materials and keep getting items and stuff. It's something that requires them to continuously have trade. And I think that also makes more sense that these guilds would be way more in communication with each other, because with the wizard guilds, I imagine it's way more like, oh yeah, these are our allies, we'll talk to them, we trust like members in that guild and their guild master and stuff, versus the alchemist guilds make way more sense that even if, say, like, their guilds, like, they didn't like these guys as friends, they look at it more as like a business thing, where it's like, oh, we don't really like these guys that much, but they have this specific material that we need, and they sell it at a good price, and they trade up for this thing that we have that they want. And it's just one of those kind of ways that business more kind of connects in the needs of the people rather than personal kind of like ties and whatnot. It becomes more, again, like a business thing rather than kind of like an alliance or like an ally type situation. But I thought it was funny when they're talking and the wording behind it, when Minerva's like saying these are alchemists and they're not within our current level of comprehension. And it's funny because like I feel like people are gonna take that as a power level thing and not like the reality of it's like the easiest way to word that direct way is she's saying we're wizards, we don't know shit about science. Like we're in a like they're in a spot where strength wise they're fine, but power wise in terms of like wild cards, like stuff that they could run into could be a lot weirder, because obviously this is a completely different type of power system, and these are people that they aren't used to interacting with. These are abilities that they don't have experience fighting. And like they would have, I would assume they would run into stuff like obviously not having magic and not having anything like that. It'd be difficult to like gauge your opponent, because like if you are a wizard, you should be able to tell like if your opponent is lower on magic, if you know, assuming they have stuff like magic sensing. But it's like, how can you do stuff with an alchemist if all their stuff is just based off of like their stamina? And obviously they could, you know, get tired and show signs, but it's like there are ways around that, especially with inventions and different trinkets, drugs, and I would assume alchemy items and whatnot. there are ways for them to compensate. So it's like one of those things where it's just like a, what is it, like fish out of water, kind of like, obviously person lost in a different world kind of thing. Because obviously it's not, so far it hasn't been these alchemists are really powerful. Actually no, because we haven't really seen any powerful alchemists. We've seen alchemy. The closest one we really had is Wall. Because God Serena was using magic. I don't think we could count anything that he did as alchemy at the moment. Sai definitely hasn't been powerful. Iwashita obviously wasn't really powerful. None of the alchemists have showed a level of strength that is fearful yet. And we know that there are some. We know the Signario sisters should be capable as well as Duke. But I also assume there's going to be at least a couple more strong ones. But at least from what we've seen overall, if the only people they have to worry about are a handful at the top, then it shouldn't be like a huge deal. But I think it's way more so, again, that this is just something that they aren't experienced at dealing with, and they don't know what they're going to be dealing with. Because, like, think of it like Lucy and the old lady. Like, I will assume that she's an alchemist and not a wizard, just because this is an alchemy-focused bit, and they're in an alchemy town. But, like, think of it from Lucy's perspective. If, say, like, this lady was a wizard, she would use, like, oh, I'm going to use a magic, and then, cast, like, a type of sleeping gas. But you would be able to sense the spell. Like, you would be able to tell this lady is using magic, unless she has, like, some specific thing that shrouds it or whatever. But that's an extra variable that we're not looking at. But, like, just imagine she goes to use a spell, doesn't work, or Lucy is able to figure out, oh, she's about to use magic, because I can obviously sense that her magic in her body is welling up and she's going to do something, versus alchemy, where, say you only have to touch something in your pocket, use whatever alchemy move that turns it into this gas, and then bam. It's like, it's already out there. Lucy might not have even realized it was happening until it was too late, kind of thing. And that's, I think, the value of where alchemy is going to be is going to be, like, implementation and how exactly it's presented. Because if we get more stuff like that, where it's not as much, oh, well, these characters are, so, like, these are just random new powerful characters, where it's like, these are characters who are just going to be tricky to deal with, because, again, they're going to have strange things that are going to catch people off guard. And that's usually how, like, crazy hacks works. But I think with the different power systems, there are going to be things that, again, are more of like a sharp surprise. Because there's always the idea, like, that they could overwhelm, like, another person's attack and magic. But, like, what if it's like an alchemy attack that doesn't have anything to do with power levels, and it's like, oh, well, you can't figure that out. Well, maybe not, you can't figure it out. You didn't know that at the start because you weren't able to sense certain aspects about it, and you ended up getting caught in the effect. Similar to, again, the camera thing that the dude had. It doesn't seem that Jalal and Urza had any idea until it was too late. But, like, if they're used to looking for things like magic and curse power, and alchemy doesn't emit any form of energy signs before it happens, then yeah, then they're not going to be able to be as effective as you would expect, which I think makes sense. But Natsu's obviously mad because he's figuring out that these guys were pretty much capturing members of his guild, and now he's going to go try and deal with them. And Sabertooth wants to lend a hand. The last bit is kind of funny because it's like Natsu's like, I don't want to join Sabertooth. And Sting, the difference between these two is, like, I like Rogue, but this chapter, when Rogue said at the end, he's like, we don't feel that way either, be like, shut up, Rogue. You would be lucky to have Natsu in your guild, shut up. Sting saying no one's letting you join, I think, is better, because it's like, the idea of we don't want you to join the guild is we won't let you join the guild is a little different. Because if it was like, Natsu, we like you, but we know that we can't have you in the guild because what'll happen, versus we don't just want you in the guild. Because it'd be, like, different if it's like, we would love to have you, but we know that's a bad idea, versus, yeah, we just don't want you. And I'm just like, Rogue, shut up. After the future Rogue stuff, Natsu saved your life and your ass, so stop. Your life would be just on that pathway to destruction if it wasn't for Natsu, so show some damn respect. But, yeah, solid chapter. I think overall it was pretty good. It was like last chapter where it was, like, fun setup. I did like the character interactions. I'm bummed that Iwashita isn't powerful. Like, I didn't expect him to be powerful. I expected him to be powerful in comparison to what people probably assumed, because this was the first enemy stepping up to the main character in this arc. So it's like, chances were way more against Iwashita, but I was just hoping it would be like he's stronger than base Natsu, and that's all I was really hoping for. But obviously that wasn't the case. He got mad disrespected by Natsu. The thing though that makes me happy about it is the way that it went about. It wasn't done in a boring way. Because, like, the way that I was thinking about it and the idea of, like, oh, man, what if Natsu, fodders this dude? Is, the best example that I can think of is, think of, like, when Fairy Tail ran into the Twilight Ogre members right before the Grand Magic Games inside of the Labyrinth, the Sky Labyrinth. And it's, like, one of those panels where it's, like, you're looking at them. The next panel, you're in a different spot behind where they were, and you didn't attack, and you threw them up in the air. Probably not even a named attack, and they're done. And that's it. And I was like, that was what I was not wanting. I'm happy about this because it's at least done in a cool way that like stands out. It's done in a way that was obviously, in a new hype moment kind of way. Because, like, we've had parts where obviously people have, like, tried to use meta weapons on Natsu, and they've melted. But, like, a dude swinging this big-ass, also heat-based, pickaxe into his face. Not from the, he didn't swing the hammer bit. He swung the blade. So, and not just the blade, a tipped blade. So it's like a piercing attack on top of that. So this is the easiest for, just like talking about that, I guess, it depends. I don't want to go too much into it, because I mentioned it being a piercing attack. There's probably going to be some people like, what do you mean? It's like a force thing, obviously. It's like you punch somebody with the same force, like a blunt fist versus like a blade, that sharp line, versus like a needle, where it's like because of that tiny tip getting all that same force, it's going to be able to do more. It's obviously like thinking of like a bullet once it's shot. It's like that level of force put into that tip is going to have a lot more piercing and danger power, pretty much. But Natsu pretty much just, like I said, sneezes, takes this guy out. I'm kind of hoping that he ends up becoming an ally, but I am happy that he lost in a way that at least is memorable. Because that's like, him being remembered as like this guy that got mauled by Natsu sneezing is better than him just being forgotten about as this character that like barely got a name that Natsu pretty much just walked past and slapped and that was it. That's pretty much what I wanted to avoid most. So it's like, it sucks that like he got foddered, because I like character designs like this. Like, there's these big, overly sized muscle meatheads. Because Mishima doesn't do them often. We don't get a lot of these ones. Like, he'll have characters who are buff, but not a lot of these characters who are just, like 99% muscle. Like, Iwashita has to be, like, 7, maybe plus feet tall, and, like, 300 to 400 pounds of just straight muscle. He's big. And so, like, I was hoping he'd be a little more relevant, but I'm not too mad at it. My hopes now is that maybe he'll become like a little ally. Maybe he'll give him some information, apologize for what happened. But we'll see, because I could see Natsu going and finding this dude too, and then it being like a gimme information type bit. Like I could see them being at their HQ, wherever their base is, and just kind of sitting and be like, wow, we're glad that guy didn't try and fight us. Like, that guy was gonna beat the shit out of us. And then you look, and then you hear like a knock at the door, and then you open it, and he's staring at you pissed off, and it's like, oh fuck, no. So it's like, I could see Natsu running into them and having like a scenario where like he's just like, listen, you guys are gonna tell me what I want to know, and we'll be cool. Otherwise, things are gonna go bad for you, kind of thing. But anyway, other than that, as I said, solid overall. It was just kind of pretty much like a setup chapter, kind of. Not like a setup chapter, I guess. A bit at the end, but more so of just kind of like progressing some of the bits we already knew. Set up, obviously, with what the plot is. Like, they're going to be working with, like, Natsu's going to be with Sabertooth, going to help the other guild members. But I am very happy that we were in a spot that it made it so the Sabertooth members can participate. Because that was one of the things I was worried about, was like, how is Mishima going to put it so they can contribute without it being either overshadowing Fairy Tail members, or without it being overshadowed by Fairy Tail members. But it's like, if this is going to be a part where multiple members are in a spot where they can't fight, and instead we're going to be seeing the Sabertooth members fight instead, I think that'd be pretty sweet. I'm happy about that. The one I want to see... Oh, no. So I want to see Minerva fight. Obviously, the biggest thing I want to see happen out of Sabertooth, I've been wondering for years, is if Sting and Rogue can go into a White Shadow Dragon either hybrid mode or Dragon Force at will. I feel like they have to. It's been over a year. Like, they should have trained it to at least a partial degree. Like, I don't expect them to have it fully mastered and everything, but it's like, if they can just enter the form for 10 seconds, that's all I need. Anyway, other than that, comment below, thumbs up the video, prefer the like button, subscribe button, and check out my other videos. I gotta remember to start doing it at the beginning. I'm gonna go do it at the beginning of the video, so if you get to the end of this video, just know that I added the bit at the start of the video, at the end of the video, so it's at the start of the video instead of the end of the video, but it will be also at the end of the video. Anyway, other than that, comment below, the video, and everything like that. Bye.